Hello and welcome to the Homeless Consultants channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. Today I'm going to talk about Joe Biden / Barack Obama's, quote, disinformation board. President Donald Trump created a new agency in the American government. It was called Space Force. The liberals laughed at it, yet it was meant to be a positive move toward defending all citizens equally as a unified nation. This is exactly the kind of action we would expect from a true leader who is doing something positive to protect and defend his country. Joe Biden, the man who calls himself president today, created a new agency. His agency is called the Disinformation Board, part of the Department of Homeland Security. This is meant to be a negative force toward pitting citizens at war against each other in a classic divide and conquer strategy. That is exactly the kind of action we would expect from the agent of a foreign nation, which they would use to destroy this country from within. There's the comparison and contrast between the agency that Donald Trump set up and the one that Biden set up. The usual suspects recently have been talking about disinformation all the time. And what they've been doing is grooming the public like a predator grooms a child. Naive, inexperienced, not knowing how to evaluate things properly, basically immature people. Why has the word disinformation being used so much lately, all of a sudden? Especially when they're not talking about disinformation. You see, here's what disinformation is. If you're at war with another nation, or if it's a kind of Cold War and you're talking about spies, disinformation is where you go in and you present information that is not true, specific information that is not true, for the purpose of compelling that nation, either its leaders or its people, to believe the wrong thing. Because you can only make wise decisions and take wise actions to the extent that you have full and complete sufficient knowledge of the situation. That's why scam artists always try to deprive you of essential information, such as the information that they're a scam artist, for example. What they're talking about is just people, ordinary people in their daily lives, talking, as the First Amendment allows, about whatever it is they want to talk about, giving their own opinions, telling what they believe, what they think. That's not disinformation, folks. That's speech. The usual suspects have been grooming the public lately, talking about disinformation. Specifically, Barack Obama. Out of nowhere, everyone's talking about disinformation. What a coincidence. Just as Elon Musk is buying out Twitter to restore free speech to Twitter. Just as we're approaching an election where the Democrats fully expect to be annihilated and removed from power, possibly forever. What a coincidence. As with all liars, they are framing it in an inaccurate context. In other words, they're lying. Right? They're putting it under the banner of national defense. Folks, ordinary people, 350 million Americans speaking their minds, is not a national defense problem. That's what people do. That's what you do with the only life you will ever live. You talk throughout your whole life. You talk. Sometimes what you say is right. Sometimes what you say is wrong. But as people talk to each other over the course of a life, if you're a thinking being, you grow and you move toward maturity, intellectual maturity, and knowledge that is more consistent with reality as you get older. It's called growing up. And people continue to do it after they're age 18. Some people stop doing it, though, before they're 18, even when they become Speaker of the House of Representatives, for example. This Disinformation Bureau is, in fact, the true threat to our national security. And the fact that the Department of Homeland Security is going to run this thing means, I'm sorry, folks, if you know mathematics, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. It means that the Department of Homeland Security has just become an enemy of the United States of America. What they are supposed to do, if they're truly defending the homeland, is when someone like Joe Biden tells them to implement this plan, they are supposed to defend us against Joe Biden. That's how you defend the country against what appears to be the agent of a foreign nation who is trying to destroy this country. With that in mind, I'm going to give you 20 reasons why this disinformation board is fundamentally not just dangerous, but it is an existential threat to the United States of America. Before I go over the 20, I'm going to briefly mention what I mentioned in my last video and I have mentioned in others. As a whatever this organization is supposed to be, federal board, part of Homeland Security, federal regulators, they are unelected, they are unaccountable to the people. For some reason, our legal system has gravitated to the point where it just ignores the Constitution of the United States altogether. The Constitution, the one that those Congress people take a vow to protect, preserve, and defend. The Constitution clearly says Congress shall make laws. And yet they have allowed regulators to create regulations that have the force of law. These regulators are not elected. They are not accountable. They cannot be removed when they become a threat to the American people, damaging, hurtful to the American people. Keep that in mind as you think about what this disinformation board is supposed to be. I have to put on my glasses for this. Number one, I should say Biden and Obama, because this is Obama 3.0, right? Biden-Obama's Disinformation Bureau takes away individual power and responsibility to determine what is true and false for yourself as a thinking human being. Information is power. Knowing what is true and false is information. Therefore, knowing what is true or false is power. This board, by definition, takes away the people's power. It can't do anything other than that. Number two, Biden/Obama's disinformation board is fundamentally offensive to the human intellect. It replaces the intellectual exercise of determining what is true and what is false with something being handed to you on a silver platter that somebody, some random Yahoo, calls truth. And they just claim that that they've researched it and that they figured out that this is true. Folks, in other words, what this does is it dumbs down the masses. It dumbs people down. Critical thinking skills are a use it or lose it proposition. If you don't use your critical thinking skills, you're going to lose them. And you're not going to be able to think very well. Look around you in society and you'll see that that's true. When somebody comes up and says you no longer have the right to even go out and research and investigate and critically think and speak and listen and debate and argue to come to an understanding of what is true, and instead you just shut up, put duct tape on your mouth, and we'll come over and hand you what is true. What they're doing is they're telling you there's this big chunk of your brain that you are now legally not allowed to use anymore. What is going to happen to people when they are not legally allowed to use their brain the way it was meant to be used to determine what is true for themselves? It is the intellectual equivalent of like an Egyptian pharaoh, where all those people carrying him around on the poles and he never actually has to walk. The one time he has to run because the enemy's invading, he's going to fall to the ground because his muscles have atrophied. He hasn't used them. That's what's going to happen to the American people as they are no longer allowed to exercise their intellect. Number 3, Biden/Obama's disinformation board obliterates debate, discourse, and argument, which are 3 of the hallmarks of civilization versus the animal world. Do you understand what I just said? Debate, discourse, and argument, those are founding cornerstones of human civilization. Without that, you have nothing but barbarism. Barbarians. Wasn't it Hillary Clinton who said, we can no longer be civilized? She's one of the usual suspects. Do you see a pattern here? Number 4, Biden/Obama's disinformation board literally is a ministry of truth. A la 1984. And every dictatorship that has ever existed, including Vladimir Putin, has done this. In fact, they couldn't exist if they didn't do this. I say it literally is a ministry of truth versus saying that it's analogous to a ministry of truth because, as I told you a moment ago, they're not even what they call disinformation is not disinformation. It's speech. It's a speech board. They are literally going to dictate like a dictator, what is true. And if you disagree with that, what's going to happen? That is a ministry of truth. This is literally what the book 1984 warned us about. Number 5, Biden/Obama's disinformation board cultivates powerlessness, fear, paranoia among individual citizens. That renders them incompetent, useless, and counterproductive as citizens of a free society. Taking away people's ability to determine what is true for themselves and to speak it with force, and to argue it with other people so that everybody can go back and forth and come to the truth. That cultivates powerlessness, fear, and paranoia among individual citizens. Number 6, Biden/Obama's disinformation board is easily abused and exploited by leaders in power, and it is guaranteed to be abused and exploited by government. Wasn't it Barack Obama who used the IRS as a weapon against his political opponents? How do you think this is going to be used? Number 7, Biden/Obama's disinformation board institutionalizes deliberate big lies. Adolf Hitler came to power using the big lie. All you have to do is read his book, Mein Kampf. He told people how he was going to do it before he did it, and nobody listened, and he got away with it. And the consequences were catastrophic for the entire planet. A big lie is when someone in power who has control over the media, who has control over speech and discourse, tells a lie that is so completely obviously wrong and distant from reality, such as Jews are the problem with everything. You tell a lie that's that big, and all of the people out there who they can't have a dialogue. They can't discourse with the people who are saying this. So they're left as part of a huge mass of people. And the only thing they have to go on to figure out, their sense and their intellect tells them that what they're hearing is nothing but a blatant lie. But they get their cues from social proof, the people around them. But so is everybody else in that crowd. And what happens is everyone in that crowd as a mass tends to basically say to themselves, what I'm hearing makes absolutely no rational sense at all. It isn't consistent with the world I live in. It seems like it's just a big lie, but it looks to me like everyone around me believes it, and I don't want to be the only person standing out from the crowd not believing it, so I'm going to shut my mouth, and I'm going to go ahead and just behave as if what I'm hearing is true, even though I can tell as a thinking human that this is stupid. And then what you end up with is an entire nation that behaves as if they believe in something that very few of them even believe in the first place. Number 8, Biden/Obama's disinformation board is a defining characteristic of cults. Those of you who watch my channel know that I have studied cults for the last 30 years or so. I would consider myself an expert on cults. For a group to qualify as a cult, they must attempt to control the flow of information to cult members. They have to. A cult cannot survive and thrive unless the leaders at least attempt to control the flow of information. For a group to qualify as a cult, leaders must claim to be the source of real truth. And it's all those outsiders, those heathens, those people we need to fear and stay away from and shut ourselves apart from as a cult. They're the ones who don't know the truth, but the leader knows the truth. This disinformation board meets the defining criteria of a cult. Number 9, the Biden/Obama disinformation board is a religious institution. Only a religious institution claims to have sole and sovereign knowledge of the truth. That's what a religion is, isn't it? Buddhists claim to know the truth. Muslims claim to know the truth. Christians claim to know the truth. Jim Jones claimed to know the truth. Charles Manson. Is the government supposed to establish a religion, or is that unconstitutional? Number 10, Biden/Obama's disinformation board is comprised of government, and government is nothing more than a group of random yahoos. Government is that person and this person and that person and that person. It's that really smart person. It's that really stupid person. It's people in between. It's people who are evil and people who are saints. It's a bunch of random yahoos. There's nothing special about government. They are not capable of doing anything better than another group. There's nothing about them that makes them special. Giving them control over defining what is true or false is like taking any other random group in society, including a cult, or should I say in this case, a different cult, and giving them the authority to dictate what is true or false. Number 11, Biden/Obama's disinformation board. With that, the burden of proof falls on the citizen, while the judge works for the very same organization that is prosecuting that citizen, the government. If that board says that you are spitting out disinformation, even if you are telling the God's honest truth and you can demonstrate it, you have to prove it to a judge who works for the people who are accusing you. That is one of the definitions of criminal racketeering. People go to prison for that. This is Biden and Obama's disinformation board. Let me repeat what I just said. People go to prison for that specific action. It's called a criminal racket. Number 12, Biden/Obama's disinformation board is inherently divisive. It is not even capable of bringing people together in harmony. It can serve no other purpose than to divide. Divide and conquer. Number 13, when it comes to Biden/Obama's disinformation board, controlling information is the last resort for liars and violent bullies who are being exposed. What happens on a schoolyard when the bully is punching you around and you threaten to go tell the principal about it? What does the bully say to you? You tell me, what does the bully say to you? Because you know what the bully says to you. What does the bully say to you when you threaten to go talk to the principal? Exactly. If you talk to the principal, I'm going to give you the beating of a lifetime. They threaten you. This kind of action is the last resort of somebody who is about to be exposed. Number 14, Biden/Obama's Disinformation Board not only violates the First Amendment, which couldn't be more clear in guaranteeing us the right of free speech, period. It is also the polar opposite of the First Amendment. If the First Amendment says that we have the right to freedom of speech and the free exercise thereof, and Congress can make no law in any way, shape, form of any kind whatsoever to prevent us from exercising free speech. We can say anything we want, using any words we want, anywhere we want, anytime we want, to any person we want, and Congress can do nothing about it. What is the polar opposite of that? It would be a government that says, we prohibit you from saying this or that, or in this place, or to this person, or at this time. That's what Biden/Obama's Disinformation Board is. Number 15, Biden/Obama's Disinformation Board can be utilized to erase the results of an entire lifetime of valid scholarship. Look at my channel and all the things I have done, spending my entire adult life studying the criminality of the anti-smoking industry and the junk science that has come from it and the playbook that has been used by that for things like COVID, climate change, and a whole lot of other things. Now, whether you agree with what I'm saying or not isn't even the point. You haven't heard everything I have to say on this. But I have spent my entire life doing scholarly research on this topic. I am an expert on the criminality of the anti-smoking industry and what they have done, the damage they have done to our society. Irreparable damage. Biden/Obama's Disinformation Board would not let me say a word about it. In other words, everything I've done with my entire adult life in terms of scholarship, I'm not even allowed to tell anyone anymore. I can't speak it. I can't write it. I can't present it to other people. An entire lifetime wasted in the pursuit of real truth. And this will apply to every citizen out there who spends their life trying to learn the truth. Number 16, Biden/Obama's Disinformation Board obliterates our natural defense against lies. What defense do we have against lies if there's some entity up above acting as our parent who says, I will tell you what the truth is and you will believe it, or you will shut up and not tell anybody else that you don't believe it, or else? What is your defense against those kinds of lies? What can you do? You were just told what's going to happen if you do anything to defend against it. What if you try to think? What if you try to go have a dialogue and a discourse with someone who believes differently to see whether or not maybe they are right and you were wrong all along, trying to determine what the truth is? That's not allowed by a disinformation board. It annihilates our natural defense against lies. Number 17. The only people who are promoting Biden/Obama's Disinformation Board are known pathological liars. Number 18. Biden/Obama's Disinformation Board. It is the institutionalization of big tech's recent censorship and control over the flow of information by the government. Do you like what Facebook and Twitter have been doing and YouTube? I don't like spending 6 years making more than 250 videos under conditions of living in this car, only so that YouTube can censor and shadow ban everything that I'm doing. I don't like that censorship one bit. Now, what if every time I go out anywhere in the world, in public, and I try to say something, and I have the same censorship by the government? This is obliterating the purpose of our lives, folks. We have all seen the devastating effects of big tech censorship. We saw it in the last election, didn't we? And we've seen it in plenty of other places. You want the government to have that kind of control? Number 19, Biden/Obama's Disinformation Bureau is the type of institution that would immediately be installed upon the takeover by a dictatorship. A dictatorship has to have something like a disinformation board. They have to control the flow of information. They have to dictate, as a dictatorship, what is true, what is false, what is information, what is disinformation. They have to, because otherwise all those people out there are going to talk about what a rotten, horrible, evil person this dictator is, and all of those millions of people are going to annihilate that one dictator. And that's why Hitler called it a big lie. It allows one person to stand in a crowd. Watch the movie Triumph of the Will, which was produced as a propaganda film by the Nazi Party. Hundreds of thousands of Germans out there, all of them being oppressed, manipulated, and screwed over by one man who stands right in front of them. Hundreds of thousands of Germans who could have taken that one man and ripped his head right off. And instead, that one man had that much power over hundreds of thousands of Germans. Why? Because he controlled the information. That's what a dictatorship does. We are seeing this today in Russia. Russia has just done one of the most evil things we've seen in human history. Just going into a sovereign nation who wasn't a threat to anybody. Most peaceful people you're going to find, and just start systematically destroying everything and everybody in that nation. For no reason at all, except because one madman is insane enough to want to do it. And all these people are following him. Why? Because he has established what is essentially a disinformation board in Russia. And the Russian people don't have the foggiest idea what reality is anymore. The same thing is true in the Soviet Union. The same thing was true in Nazi Germany. The same thing was true today in China. The same thing is true in North Korea. The same thing is true in Iran. The same thing is true in communist China. And every banana republic in South America that had some tin pot dictatorship. And yet, that's not true in civilized countries. Do you see a pattern? Notably, the American founders, who took great care and concern over a long period of time to establish the Constitution of the United States, they did not do this. They did not include a disinformation board in the Constitution. I wonder why. Instead, they included the First Amendment, the polar opposite. Mr. Biden, who claims to be the President of the United States, took an oath of office to protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution, the one that does not include a disinformation board, but it does include the First Amendment. Who is the real enemy of the American people? Number 20, Biden/Obama's Disinformation Board. Throughout history, those who have opposed dictatorship have always warned us against this very thing. I could sit here and list out a bunch of examples and read you quotes from Winston Churchill or Plato or I could do anything you want. But that was your responsibility, wasn't it? What have you been doing with your life? Therefore, Biden/Obama's disinformation board is utterly indefensible in any rational, intellectual, legal, or historical context. It can only be justified in one way and one way only, as a means toward destroying the United States of America as a free and a sovereign nation. This is not only an existential threat to the United States, this is an act of open warfare against the American people. The question is Mr. Biden/Mr. Obama the sole people who are going to war against the American people, or are they acting as agents for another power? I leave you with this one question. This question is for members of the United States Congress. What are you going to do about this if you love your children at all?